Well, going on, my fellow Tenno, Kobe here with another Warframe video. Hope everyone's had a great week. Thank you guys so much for stopping by. Please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you like Warframe content. But yeah, so let's get into today's video. So as you guys know, I've been doing this, well, I started with one video prior, but I'll be doing a series going over the least used Warframe, the 5 least used Warframe, being Oberon, Equinox, Grendel, Banshee, and today's suspect, the Master of Post Migration himself, Limbo, right? So what this series is essentially me looking at Warframes at the bottom 5 prime Warframes, excluding Trinity and Nyx because they got reworks recently and they're pretty good, and looking to see exactly why they're the least used and to see if it's like a major glaring issue or if it's just a situation with the player base, right? So today's video will be covering Limbo, and what I'll be doing is essentially looking at a build as well as playing Limbo for a bit, and then I'll give you guys, well, throughout my play session, I'll be talking to you guys and telling you guys exactly what I think. And yeah, so let's get into it. So Limbo passive allows you to essentially enter his void slash rift. It's a dimension or second plane of existence where Limbo can exist at all times. You also gain energy passively whilst in the rift. And for his first ability is Banish, which essentially you're able to banish enemies within a cone to said rift. You're able to put them in the rift. While they're there, they cannot interact with anyone else outside of the rift or on the next plane of existence. Same for Limbo as well. And for his second ability, this is Stasis. All enemies within the rift are frozen, and I do believe this does not scale with range. So wherever the enemies are, once you have the duration up on Stasis, they'll stay put. And for his third ability is Rift Surge. You're able to bound enemies with Rift Energy, kill the enemies, essentially transfer said Rift Surge over to other enemies. So it's like a cascading effect similar to like Breach Surge, right? And when it comes on to this, whenever an enemy is banished whilst in the rift, they're able to actually banish other enemies, right? So for instance, if they're in the rift and you banish them back to the normal plane, all enemies that are around them in a 25-meter radius get pulled into the rift, right? So it's a great way to continue building up and keeping enemies in your rift. And for his fourth ability, Cataclysm, this is probably one of the most known ones, the most annoying one for most players. Essentially, you just bring the rift into reality. It does a little bit of damage and essentially keeps the enemies in the rift, right? This is the build right here that I'm running in this video. I had to go ahead and make it over on Warframe, primarily because when I was filming this video, I forgot to actually film or record the build section. So I went ahead and just went to Warframe, drafted it up, and then screenshotted it and put it here. This is just a one-time thing. I don't really use Warframe that often. It's just that it was the best idea that I could come up with, besides going back to turning back on my Switch and all that stuff. So, you know, bear with me. And for today's loadout, we'll be using the Dual Toxicist with Secondary Fortifier. This is the build for the Dual Toxicist. Reason being is most people's gripe with Limbo is that he's weak to Eximus abilities, seeing that once you're in the rift, the only thing that can interact with enemies on either side of the plane are abilities, Warframe abilities, or Eximus abilities. So having Overguard from Secondary Fortifier, I'll be able to essentially like negate all forms of Eximus abilities whilst being in the rift as well, comfortable. Right, and now moving over to the next part, or the next vital part, not really vital, but the next key part of today's loadout. This would be the Falcor. You could use Zorus if you want to, or even the Glaive Prime if you'd like. I'm just using the Falcor with a melee influence build, primarily because melee influence is something that does bypass Limbo's rift, right? You know that whenever you're shooting at an enemy that's outside of the rift while you're inside, or vice versa, you can't actually interact with them. Your bullets won't actually hit them. Your melee weapons won't hit them. However, melee influence does proc through the rift. I'm not sure if this is intentional, but it's something and it exists. And let's talk about that further on, but for right now, this is the companion that we'll be running. We'll be using Nautilus, primarily that whenever I'm using Cataclysm, because I won't be using any helmets today. When it comes on to using Cataclysm to essentially pull the enemies in or group them up, and that's why we have Nautilus here with Cataclysm. We also have Reinforced Bond to give ourselves some more fire rate. We have Sync Deconstruct, which is not necessary when you run in this Limbo build because I don't have Equilibrium. But yeah, so this is primarily the build for the Verglass as well. It is a very high DPS build. What reason being is because running duplex spawn on my Nautilus, every time I use a certain amount of energy, my Nautilus will spawn out clones, and those clones are able to actually interact with enemies that are inside or outside of the rift, or vice versa. They're able to attack them from anywhere because they're pretty much seen as abilities. And as I said, yeah. When it comes on to a more in-depth Limbo guide, I definitely recommend go check out Sci-Fi Freaks Limbible. It's a very good video when it comes on to really understanding everything about Limbo and how he works and everything about his kit. And this right here is me showing off his abilities. As you see, you could just go ahead and roll and you'll enter into the rift. You could know that you're in the rift by the weird coloring. And for enemies, you'll know that they're in the rift by looking at their feet. You'll see it like shimmer. I do wish there was a better identifier, because sometimes it doesn't really stand out that much and you can't do anything about it with your energy colors. So it's a bit annoying. That's one of the most like annoying things when it comes on to actually having a Limbo in your party, because 9 times out of 10, most players won't be paying too much attention to see who's in the rift and who's not. And they'll be like, yo, Limbo, get out of here. Why are you, keeping the enemies away from me? Why can't I do damage? Without actually understanding. And as I said, this right here for a second ability, Stasis. Once the enemies are in the void, you're able to essentially freeze them. They're unable to do anything at all. And for your entire duration, there's nothing that can actually get them to start moving unless a nullifier walks over them, right? And cancels out the ability of that specific enemy, right? And as you guys can see, this is a 4 Cataclysm, putting a big rift bubble on the map. And as you see, you could walk in, walk out at any time, at any given moment. If you use your roll and then you walk into it, you don't do the vice versa, you're still in there, right? And this right here is essentially me trying to show you guys that melee influence procs through the rift. This is not a good demonstration because Nautilus keeps pulling everyone together. However, you'll see more of it in the actual Steel Path run. So yeah, so actually while we're here getting into the Steel Path run, I want to talk about the overhead thing when it comes on to Limbo, right? The overall outlook on Limbo when it comes on to the community, because 90% of the time most players don't know why Limbo is hated. From what I've really recognized, like a lot of players that are primarily like casual players or new players, and even some veteran players don't know why Limbo is hated. They just know that people don't like Limbo, and then they don't like Limbo as well. Because primarily Limbo was used prior, before even I started playing the game, to troll and a bunch of stuff. Like when I did some research on why people hate Limbo, it used to like really mess up gameplay flows and really like mess with like players when it comes on to picking up loot, damaging enemies, and a bunch of stuff. But realistically, nowadays, some of that still exists. And I don't think anyone really goes out of their way nowadays to actually troll using Limbo. You probably find someone trolling with a low-key switch teleporting more than you actually find someone trying to troll with a Limbo. If I'm being honest, as someone who's been trolled with low-keys a lot, like a lot, I've been tormented by low-keys in missions, especially like capture missions because I'm a Gauss main. Yeah. Right, I'm going off on a tangent. Let's get back to Limbo. When it comes on to Limbo, I do understand that 90% of the player base does not understand Limbo, his kit, and anything that actually has to do with him. To be honest, I don't really have the fullest grasp of Limbo myself, but I do understand him to a point where I do see that he's usable. I do see that he's actually a great frame. I typically put him like low tiers in my tier lists, primarily because it's a running joke. And 2, it's my tier lists are pretty much based for like newer players, as well as like players that aren't caring about too much about level cap and aren't like hardcore Warframe sweats, right? So we're looking at that way and looking at Limbo. Limbo is one of these frames that is like, if you don't know what you're doing, or if the Limbo person in your squad does not understand Limbo, Limbo is more of a hindrance to your team than an actual help. However, on the same front, putting a Limbo on your squad with someone who is competent and actually understands how Limbo works, he could be the biggest asset on that team. Especially a team that has like Warframes that are super focused on abilities, like Sevagoth with the nuking build, Mesa with her regulators and all that stuff, right? And as I said, when it comes on to the mechanics of Limbo, some of it is janky, some of it is good, but like right here for instance, right? This was a moment where the enemies weren't like in stasis because of the, I don't even know what caused them to come out of stasis, but yeah, this right here with my operator is one of the biggest things, one of the biggest weaknesses with Limbo, in my opinion. What your operator cannot exist in the void, right? Or the rift. I keep calling it the void, you know what I mean. Your operator cannot exist in the rift, right? Therefore, if you go into last grasp whilst there, you can't kill any of the enemies with your amp to revive yourself. You have to leave the rift and find enemies, right? And going back to what I said prior, if you're using Rift Surge, any enemy that is banished from the rift does a radial banish in 25 meters. Therefore, if an enemy leaves the rift, they'll pull other enemies around them in the rift. And when you're out there trying to get your kills with your operator, you'll pretty much probably just be shooting at enemies that are actually in the rift again. So you can't interact with him. You can't exist in the rift. It's a terrible thing when it comes on the last grasp. I do wish DE would make the operator able to go in and out of the rift just like a Warframe would. It's only logical, right? And as I said, when it comes on to Limbo's actual kit, it's actually pretty good. 9 times out of 10, you'll see most people say, oh, let's remove Banish, because Banish is objectively his weakest ability, or the most redundant ability, because you have Cataclysm, which essentially banishes everyone in a big AoE. I'd still say the best, if you are going to subsume something off, if you were able to like fully understand Limbo, and you're able to actually like manage his mechanics, then remove Cataclysm. You could go, as I said, with his third ability, Rift Surge, you could go ahead and pull enemies into the rift by banishing the enemies that are affected by Rift Surge. And how you do that is essentially you just hold down on your first ability, or hold on banish. Essentially what that does is it unbanishes everyone in the area, or everyone that you're looking at, right? And if you unbanish everyone that you're looking at and they have Rift Surges active, they'll just go ahead and pull everyone else right back into the rift. Very simple. So you can go ahead and swap out Rift Surge for whatever you want. And yeah. So realistically, Limbo is one of these Warframes that is very, very strong. Super great when it comes on to survivability. Especially in a situation like this where you're running the dual toxis, not even the dual toxis, any weapon, any secondary weapon with the secondary fortifier mod, you'll be able to, arcane I should say, you'll be able to keep yourself alive, keep yourself safe from Eximus abilities. And as I said, melee influence is able to damage enemies that are outside of the rift. These necromechs here, as you guys are seeing, they cannot exist inside of the rift, no matter where they are. Whether you're in your Cataclysm, whether you try to banish them, they cannot exist inside of the rift. And the only way that I actually focus on killing them, because I'm not leaving the Cataclysm, I'm not leaving the rift. The only way to actually kill them is melee influence. I keep hitting the enemies inside here with my Falcor, and the melee influence procs go over to the necromech, killing it. Right? And when it comes on to the acolytes, it's pretty much the same story. They are able to be inside of the rift, especially if you use the Rift Surge tactic and pull them in. They'll be here, and you'll just go ahead and hit them really hard, just like you do in any mission, because realistically, Limbo is a weapons platform. His abilities don't outright do a bunch of damage, they just allow you to do a bunch of damage whilst being safe. It's like having a closet or having a comfortable spot in your room that you really like. It's your safe space. You have it in your pocket. You can just go there whenever you feel like. That is what Limbo is. That's what Limbo does. Do I see why some people in the community dislike Limbo? Of course. Limbo isn't the greatest frame. Limbo isn't the best frame to play with in teams, unless the person that is using the Limbo understands, as well as the people that are playing around the Limbo understand, right? Because realistically, you can't just leave it to the Limbo player to orchestrate everything. The other players must understand that, hey, this is what I can and can't do whilst in the rift, and this is what I can do whilst in the rift. Will that ever be a case where everyone understands how Limbo works? Definitely not. So will it be a case where Limbo is accepted as a good Warframe? Probably not. I don't see it happening. right? And also here, as you guys can see, I'm fighting violence. I'm able to just go back into the rift, even though we neutralized all my abilities and cataclysm. I just roll into the rift. You can't hurt me, can't do me anything, right? But as I was saying before to that tangent, at the end of the day, Limbo is Limbo. Limbo will keep getting hated on, and I don't think DE will actually like do anything to change anything in Limbo's kit, because realistically, I don't think he has a bad kit, or does he have a bad design? No. I think it's just a case where some of the things that he can do, it's not it's not like readily available for us to go ahead and see and know and then execute ourselves, right? And so yeah, that is my rant or my take on Limbo. Hope you guys enjoyed. And yeah, I'll be doing another video soon, so stay on the lookout. Please subscribe and like the videos. I really do appreciate it. It helps me grow. Thank you guys so much, and have a wonderful day. Peace.